Hi everybody, welcome back to Principles in Curriculum Design. My name's Alex Ford and I'm a Schools History Project Fellow and PGCE tutor at Leeds Trinity University. As ever, this session will involve a range of issues around curriculum and you will find links to all the materials that I'm referencing in the description below this video. Right, folks, I've snuck in a sneaky extra session at this point, partly because I began going through and looking at a third way in curriculum, and what I realised is actually we probably need to think a little bit more about what Ofsted are saying about curriculum. So up to this point, if you've watched all the sessions so far, you'll know we've thought about why we're interested in curriculum at this point. We've thought about what a traditional model of curriculum looks like and what a progressive model of curriculum looks like, and how they address some of those Tyler questions that I outlined in the second session. But it would be interesting to think about what the Ofsted model of curriculum is. Now, Ofsted claim they don't have a model, but what can we learn about the way Ofsted are thinking about curriculum? Is it closer to a traditional model, a progressive model, or is it something else? So this is kind of a session 3A, and it will address that question in terms of Ofsted in particular, how they're viewing curriculum. So you'll find a range of things in the pack that I've linked down below around Ofsted and how they are interpreting curriculum. And I think it's a really interesting exercise to read over how Ofsted talk about curriculum now that we know a little bit about the different ways we could think about curriculum from the previous sessions. So you might want to just have a read through those even before we start this, just so you're aware of what's being said. You could do that from the extracts I've included, or if you feel like it, you could read the whole framework and handbook, which you can find on the Ofsted website. So we've already looked at the Ofsted framework in one of the previous sessions. We know we've got these four big areas: quality of education, behaviour, leadership, personal development. And we know that quality of education is split into intent or aims, implementation and impact. Now, Ofsted have been at great pains to say they're not prescribing a particular curriculum. And it's true, they're not. They're not saying you have to study X, Y, and Z. However, their curricular aims and the things they value in what they're going to inspect do imply a particular model of curriculum, I think. And both quality of education here and personal development here have quite interesting links to curriculum and curriculum models. So we're just going to have a look at those and see if we can reverse engineer what Ofsted are thinking here. So personal development and its relationship to the curriculum. Again, this is in the pack if you want to have a look at it. And a nice task would be, well, what do you think they're implying before I talk you through it? So if you want to pause me now, that would be a good time. Okay, so for me, we've got things in here. Pupils are allowed to develop spiritually, morally, socially, and culturally beyond the academic and vocational curriculum as part of personal development. Pupils are supported to develop their character in and beyond the curriculum, including resilience, confidence. Personal, social, health and economic curriculum contribute to personal development. Pupils have developed understanding of British values. Wider opportunities, visits, discussions and literature provide those. So there is stuff in here about developing the wider values that we want in our pupils. And some of that, interestingly, is about character. So we've got things down here. So this is a very traditional model: resilience, confidence, independence. That's kind of character. And then we've got things about respecting difference and diversity, which is much more progressive curriculum type stuff. However, whereas the progressive curriculum would say this is an inherent point of your curriculum that you're studying, I think in this Ofsted version of things, you will see that most of the time it's referred as developing these things beyond the curriculum. So there is a curriculum, which is your academic stuff, and then there's this stuff about character and being a generally nice person and British values and all the debates we could have around that. And where it does hit curriculum, it hits a particular model of curriculum, which is the PSHCE curriculum. So there's a particular subject in which these things might be studied in the classroom, and the rest is kind of beyond it. So although it's saying the role of schools is wider than just academic subjects, it's also saying but academic subjects should be taught academically. So for me, that's quite a traditional view of curriculum coming through here. And so all kinds of questions around what does that involve, and where does it come up? Well, actually, it comes up in extracurricular, PSHE, assemblies, careers advice, wider experiences, but not necessarily. So I know a few schools were already starting to audit how are we getting these values through all of our subjects? I don't think, and none of the evidence so far suggests that is. However, things like this, which is from a school in Somerset, in Dolverton, West Somerset, where I grew up, this is them becoming junior Exmoor Park Rangers. And so those kind of opportunities seem to be fantastically what we're talking about here, but not, your science curriculum being dedicated to this. What about quality of education? Well, let's have a look at some of the things said in there. Again, you might want to have a look through this. It's in the pack, and just decide what you think is coming through in terms of which sort of curriculum thinking. But if we look here, the things that jump out to me: curriculum is planned to identify the most useful knowledge. The curriculum is sequenced to ensure it's retained in memory. The curriculum should provide students with knowledge and cultural capital for future learning and employment. There's a lot here about knowledge transfer. There's a lot here about remembering knowledge. There's a lot here about developing students so that they are given access to knowledge. And for me, it's a very traditional curriculum model. Equally, if you look at the kinds of things that are talked about here, almost exclusively these are extrinsic outcomes as well. So it's identifying the most useful knowledge. Useful for what is the question, but we get some hints as we go later on. For future learning and employment, that's an extrinsic goal. For preparing for the next stage in education, extrinsic. For training or employment, extrinsic. As a matter of social justice, arguably intrinsic, but actually it is an extrinsic aim, that if we want to improve social justice in the country, we do these things. To access the curriculum, successful in national tests, which I'm just covering up with my video at the bottom here, extrinsic aim. The only stuff really here that is intrinsic is where we talk about maybe being increasingly fluent and independent in their learning, although possibly that's extrinsic as well. And the only real one, exposed to a broad and ambitious range of content. So the idea that, for the love of learning stuff, there's only a very little bit in here about love of learning, and there's an awful lot in here about a traditional model of curriculum construction transmission. Although it doesn't say that explicitly, it is implied. So if we have a look at the Ofsted model, what have we got? We've got a really weird mixture of progressivism and traditionalism in the personal development section. And that is going to sit in a special kind of curriculum section outside your academic curriculum. And then the quality education piece is a mixture of traditionalism in terms of transmitting a body of knowledge, the best that's been thought and said, and that comes up in there actually, making sure it's retained. So again, input, recall, and instrumentalism, because a lot of it's for extrinsic measures and extrinsic goals. There's not an awful lot of progressivism in here, and that is very interesting. So the big question then is, can we actually hold on to what we think is important within the confines of that Ofsted interpretation of what curriculum should be? Now, I think it would be interesting to do this, to go back to and think about what are your aims as a school level, and you can do this at a school level, but even at a department level as well, or even as an individual teacher. What do you think education is for? And that's what I want to look at in a minute, because once you've got that idea about what your aims are, you can then think about, well, how many of these tally with what Ofsted think is positive, and how many of these seem to be in tension with it. And then from that you can start to say, well, if we want to think about a coherent model of curriculum, we need to think about how we can forge a new way that doesn't that allows us to fulfill our own aims, whilst also allowing us to demonstrate that we are able to do all the things that Ofsted intend for us to do as well. Because there's, with the best will in the world, we can't just, unless we're incredibly important, powerful people in the education system, and there are a few who can plough their own furrow. Most schools, most of us as teachers, we are going to have to operate within the regulatory boundaries. So I suppose what I'm saying is we need to think about what we want to achieve so that we can hold it in tension with what we are being told is important according to the inspectorate, because of course that might change, as it has done dramatically over the last few years. And crucially, you might have a really easy job here because your aims might ally really, really closely with what Ofsted thinks is important, but they might be in tension with it. And therefore, where is the hope that you can move this forwards and still think about the things that are important in your aims? So we'll have a look at that aims activity now. So if you have a look again in the pack of information I've put in with this, you'll see these are included. I've got a list here of what we've got there, 12 things that I think could be aims in education, things that have been stated aims actually in education over time. So to enable students to be creative, to gain exam results in line with or above the national average, and so on. And just really think about, well, how would you prioritise those aims? Because actually, all of these things could be aims in education, and for most versions of a curriculum, they will be somewhere in there as an aim, but they will have different weights and different priorities. So a really interesting task is to spend some time with these, maybe put in some of your own, maybe take some out that you think are completely irrelevant, and try and create a kind of diamond 9, like I've included here, where you're trying to put, well, what do you hold to be the most important things at the top here? And what do you hold to be the least important things down at the bottom here? And where would they sit in the middle? Because once you've done that, you can start to think about, well, what's my curriculum trying to do? And then you could also think about maybe marriage with some of those extremes of curriculum thinking. But actually, I'm going to get back to that in another session where we're thinking about a different way of conceiving a curriculum altogether. But if we start from aims, then we always know where we're heading towards. And I've color coded those in 2 different ways. I've got green ones and I've got blue ones. And one set is extrinsic aims and one set is intrinsic aims. And once you've done it, you can maybe try and work out which is which in the way that you've done that. But I think that's a useful starting point for a school, but also for a department as well. Okay, I hope you found that overview useful. It was quite a brief run through. And like I say, the big message from Ofsted is they don't want to see a particular curriculum, but like I said, there is a sense of, there is maybe a way of thinking about curriculum in Ofsted. What we're going to do in the next session, therefore, the proper next session, number 4, is think about a third way in curriculum. And we'll think about, well, what might that look like? And we're going to use this term, the disciplinary model of curriculum, to hopefully frame that and give you some idea as where that might go. Okay, so I hope this has been useful. Do leave me any comments if you'd like, and I'll see you next time.